Hey, this is Sleeper. Welcome back to my channel. We are continuing the learning process module with the will. The term will is a concept interpreted differently in many disciplines. In psychology, will is considered a descriptive construct that presupposes a conscious decision to act, and thus it is primarily associated with rational action. Will is used in different contexts and has several meanings. The mental act from which an impulse to achieve specific goals emanates, and the setting of goals, and the ultimate translation of these personally or collectively made decisions into action, that is, into conscious and deliberate or even planned action. From a philosophical point of view, will is defined as deciding on a particular type of action based on the motives for acting consciously. So let us say will is the effort to perform a certain action or achieve a specific goal. Therefore, it is most relevant for us to have decided to achieve a goal that we have determined and strive for it. Before we decide to achieve a specific goal, we must become clear about our desires. In as much detail as possible, we should explain to ourselves what we want and how it must feel to achieve our goal. This process can also be thought of as dreaming, where we imagine a situation we would like to be in. Unfortunately, most people stop dreaming shortly after they start because they do not see a way to get there. These people overlook the essential component that the path plays absolutely no role in how we reach that goal, because ultimately our path is only created by the steps we take. We can look at interviews of the most famous actors, developers, and scientists, and we will see that none of them have planned and foresee their careers in the way they came about. Desire is very dependent on the belief in it. When we believe in our abilities, it relieves us of our complexes, at least from some of them, and we get access to chains of associations of our thinking, interrupted by the pressure of our fears. Let us remember and deeply internalize the following sentence. Fear is a state and the product of our imagination of the future and its consequences where the present is suppressed. Fear is essential and healthy in life-threatening and health-threatening situations. However, sitting in a chair in front of a computer, afraid of not being up to the tasks we find here, is irrational. After all, we have not yet worked through most of the material, but we are already beginning to adjust ourselves to fail. So let's ask if this fear is real. Have we already worked through the material? Have we already seen what it is being taught and how it is being taught? Do we already have to have the skills that are expected of us? If we answer no to these three questions, it should be clear that we are afraid of something without even trying. This leads to the fact that the fear, in this case, is not real. It is interesting that, especially in our field of penetration testing, many students react paradoxically. Most of those who feel a particular fear during learning are unaware of what they are afraid of. They believe they are afraid of failing and not learning something well enough. But sometimes, as soon as they get stuck on a subject that is not easy for them, they give up. Nevertheless, it is not that the failure that they were afraid of all along and wanted to avoid by all means. Actually, yes. However, these types of students find it easier to give up and fail than to keep learning and improving. Getting better inevitably happens when we keep practicing and trying different approaches. We must keep a clear goal in mind to prevent this from happening so quickly. The goal. The term goal refers to a state that lies in the future, generally changed from the present, desirable, that we aspire to fulfill. A goal is thus a defined and desired endpoint of a process. Therefore, it must be possible to determine precisely from the formulation of the goal what the desired state must be for a goal to be considered achieved. There are many different types of goals, such as quantitative goals, complementary goals, indifferent goals, secondary goals, qualitative goals, competing goals, main goals, and many more. For every single goal, dozens of different formulas and models have been created to achieve them in the best possible way. However, finding a suitable model that fits our personal needs, life experiences, and goals is not easy. Each of the models has a different focus, and to find the perfect model for us, we would have to study each and try them out for a more extended time. The biggest problem is that we are forced to abandon one of the models because we do not know if the model will lead us to our goal. And in addition, efficiency conflicts with comfort. If we feel comfortable with this model, it does not mean that it is effective and will lead us to the goal. Therefore, we would have to try another model to find out. Without knowing how the rest of the models affect our effectiveness, we would have to try all the others, which can be very time-consuming. The results of a meta-analysis of over 200 studies with more than 40,000 participants show that over 90% of people are significantly more successful in achieving their dreams by setting challenging and specific goals. We cannot emphasize strongly enough the importance of setting a clear goal for ourselves. What do we want to achieve? Do we want to pass an exam, obtain a certification, learn and master new skills, or impress and please others? As we can certainly already think and imagine, we will take different paths depending on the goal we have set for ourselves. There's even a big difference between passing an exam or just getting the certification for it. Many think that the certification proves that the trained skills have been acquired. However, for most, the certification is a formal and official acknowledgement of participation in a particular training. For example, if we only want to get the certification or even just the confirmation of having completed something, we will look for the easiest way to get closer to that goal as quickly as possible. Decisions are made to ask someone how certain tasks are solved in order not to have to think about it. An essential part of this is that by avoiding our own thinking or trying to solve the task on our own, we deprive ourselves of the possibility of creating chains of associations in our brain. These association chains are the links in our brain cells that serve our thinking processes and information links by which we learn to solve problems or situations. Thus, in simple terms, we deprive ourselves of the ability to learn something new and to develop further. Because the decision of what goal we want to achieve influences how we learn, a task or goal helps us influence how we think. Another essential aspect that we can look at, which is an excellent example, is how to reach this goal. If we want to think about it in more detail, none of the current great and well-known personalities will be able to say that they knew the path that led them to the goal beforehand. None of these people knew it. What they did know, however, was the goal that they had set for themselves. Someone who claims that his way is the only right way should stick to that way if it works for themselves. However, claiming that there are no other ways may be true for that person, but it does not mean that others cannot do it. For example, metaphorically speaking, if the person does not know how to use a ladder, they will only get to higher floors with outside help. No matter what goal we have in mind, we must decide on it. Decision making. The decision-making process in which we make our decisions about certain situations is a very extensive and complicated subject on which there are many studies and disagreements. Many different theories and phases have been created to facilitate a better overview of the thought processes of the human brain. However, as we can already imagine, it is far from easy to define such phases, as each has individual thought processes and patterns. A decision is, in simple terms, the choice of one several options. All decisions are made based on the importance of the circumstances. We make decisions based on what we expect to get the most out of it. Thus, decisions are made not only rationally, but also emotionally. Let's take a very rough and simplified situation to make it more straightforward. Let's assume that we have spontaneously been given a day off by our employer, and a friend has asked us for help. We are faced with choosing whether we want to use our available time for our project, which we want to present to our employer and expect a salary increase, or whether we want to help our friend move. If our well-being is more important to us than our own income, we decide to help with the move. On the other hand, if our income seems more important to us, we will choose spending time on our project. Research in decision psychology has established that people by no means behave exclusively in terms of cost-benefit considerations. Since many models of rationality do not realistically reflect actual decision-making behavior, a person's decision-making behavior can be understood as a process in which rationality occurs only to a limited extent. Let us look at a well-known example, the so-called trolley problem. The trolley problem is a thought experiment in which three different scenarios have occupied many philosophers, psychologists, and legal scholars for decades, and one of them is described as follows. A train speeds unbraked towards a group of 5 track workers. The switchman might divert the train to a siding where only one person is working. Should he sacrifice one person to save 5 others? Try to decide for yourself while trying to figure out how that decision came about. 70,000 people in 42 countries were surveyed, and the survey results were published in an article in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The Social and Personality Psychology Compass researchers criticized that scenario because it is too extreme. If we stay in this situation, the decision will be pretty tricky. The researchers finally said that the example is too extreme because people cannot be expected to make such decisions, and it is basically impossible to make a correct decision. This statement has many different reasons. One, it is an enormous psychological burden before, during, and after the decision for the respective person. Two, the persons representing the statement do not see a solution for the situation. And three, and many other reasons based on personal experience. This situation in which we have to decide is much more similar to the mathematics problem from the way of thinking section than it appears at first glance. Because here we have at first sight only two options. One, either we switch tracks and the train runs over one person, or two, we do nothing and 5 people are run over by the train. In our math example, we must decide where to place the smallest number to make it as easy as possible. Either we place it on the first open digit, or we place it on the second. In both cases, the procedure changes, but the result remains the same. In the math exercise, the result is 65,535. And in the trolley problem, someone is run over. Let's consider the following solution to the trolley problem. The red lines represent ropes, and the blue circles represent pillars that we have placed. The first thing that comes to mind is, but we are not allowed to place pillars, or we are only allowed to press a switch. However, the fact is that no one has told us whether we are allowed to move or not. We set our limitations ourselves, not by others. It is the same as if a stranger on the street were to tell us that we are suddenly not allowed to move while walking. Except for the fact that we will look at that person strangely, we will still walk. Unlikely, but that's another topic. If we learn to set these limitations, if we learn to set these limits based on facts, our decisions will be much easier, and above all, much more effective. If we take a closer look at the trolley problem, the first questions arise. How far away is the train? How fast is the train going? How much time do we have to try to save everyone? How can we save everyone? What tools do we have at our disposal? If we take a closer look, we will see that these factors are not given at all. They're missing, just like in the math problem. However, just as in the math problem, no one has said that we must not change the circumstances, arithmetic operators, for this. Because any additional factor can change the decision entirely. An additional example of this would be if all the people on the tracks were conscious. We could save them all by warning them to get off the tracks as quickly as possible. If we go to the extreme and say that the train will arrive in 10 seconds, it does not mean that we have to choose one of the options given to us. However, the absolute extreme solution would be to flip the white switch while the train passes over it. This is called double tracking and will likely derail the train, passing the people. We need to know the factors and assess the consequences to make a decision. The more factors we know, the more precise the decision we will be able to make for our goal. If someone tells us that something is impossible, this person cannot possibly know all the factors with which we are connected. Just because the person believes that they see no solution for a task or goal, it only means that the person does not see a solution or a way to achieve the goal. Many people accept this, but they transfer this attitude to themselves, which leads to the fact that their desired goal or even the attempt is already given up. As a result, people fail before they even try. If we do not know what to do in one situation or another, the reason is that we have not gathered enough facts to make a good decision. However, once we have gathered enough data, we can better calculate what results we will achieve in the end. And based on the facts we have gathered, we open up possibilities and paths we can take. Finally, this means that no one will ever be able to question your success if you decide on the goal defined in the detail that you really want to achieve from your heart, and that will make you happy consciously and subconsciously. Documentation. When it comes to documentation, we must first determine the report audience. We will document our activities differently than we would present our results to a customer. The purpose of documentation is to present the information we have obtained in a comprehensible and easy way to reproduce a specific activity. Therefore, the essential characteristics of documentation are: 1. Overview. 2. Structure. 3. Clarity. As we learn and practice, we will come across many different situations and resources. As discussed before, we will have to produce massive amounts of information. There are many resources available for documentation. We recommend a tool called Cherry Tree. It is essential to get clarity, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. For this, we can use a tool called Flameshot that makes it easy for us to take screenshots and edit them directly. No matter whom the documentation is intended for, here are some guidelines we can follow. It is beneficial to put ourselves in the position of our readers. This will make it much easier for us to design the documentation. Avoid repetition and ambiguity. Make documentation as easy to read as possible. No one wants to read the documentation that is difficult to understand or follow. Before we create documentation for our customers, we can clarify which points are most important to them. Optional exercise. Do some research and find examples of penetration tests, reports, and pick out the essential features. Get an overview of the following: what topics have been covered, how are they structured, and how are they presented. Organization. We've already seen the term overview mentioned several times. To understand how important this term is, imagine the following situation. You're standing on a big mountain, and at the bottom of the mountain, there's a vast forest. On the horizon, we see another mountain we want to reach. The difficulty here is that we will not see this mountain as soon as we go down into the forest. The only way to reach the mountain is to orient ourselves using lakes, rivers, and fields between the two mountains. This means we should take all the necessary tools with us, like a lighter, knife, tent, and others, and set all the interim orientation points to avoid getting lost. Because as soon as we get lost, we cannot move forward through the forest disoriented, hoping to reach our goal somehow, or we will have to move back to the first mountain to reorient ourselves. We can see how the terms depend on each other and how important it is to have a map to orient ourselves. By completing the previous exercises, we've already made the first drawings on our map. These will help us understand where we are and where we want to go. Being organized is significant in penetration testing because the entire report writing process has to be structured. It may take us a single day or to take over several systems, so we don't want to keep looking for sources of or information we need over and over again. Organization is best described in the following example. An inexperienced woodcutter takes 30 minutes to sharpen his axe and 3 hours to cut down the tree. The experienced one will sharpen the axe for 3 hours and cut down the tree within 30 minutes. There are many different management techniques and methods that we can use. These include Scrum, Agile, to-do lists, bullet journal, and more. Optional exercise. Create a list of different management techniques and methods that you can find and list all their negatives and positives. Experiment with the ones that suit you best and choose or create a method for yourself. Alright, so we'll go ahead and stop here and finish this up in the last part. Once again, my name is Sleeper, and that's a wrap. Until next time.